Before we jump into tonight's stories, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. I post new true scary stories every single day, so you'll never run out of nightmares to fall asleep to. And while you're here, drop a comment telling me your favorite horror movie of all time. I'm curious which one keeps you up at night. Now, let's get into it. I used to clean offices on the night shift. 11-floor corporate building located downtown, mostly empty after 9 p.m. I preferred it that way. Less noise, no awkward small talk, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the click of my cartwheels echoing down empty halls. My break was always the same time, 2:40 a.m. Not for any reason, it just became a habit. At that point in the night, your brain gets foggy, your body feels like it's drifting, and routine is the only thing keeping you awake. There was a small vending machine room on the 11th floor where I usually sat. It wasn't a real break room, just a narrow little space tucked between two conference rooms, with one table, two chairs, humming lights that flickered way too often, and those two vending machines. One snacks, one drinks. Old machines too, like the kind you'd see in hospitals or train stations that haven't been updated since the 90s. That place always felt a little wrong. Like the air was heavier, like the walls were a little too close, but it was the quietest spot in the building, so I used it anyway. That night started normally. I finished vacuuming the 10th floor, rode the elevator one floor up, and pushed open the vending room door. Same buzzing lights, same stale air, same distant hum of the city behind the glass window. I sat, opened a bag of chips, scrolled through my phone. Then at 2:41, I heard the elevator ding. That wasn't normal. Nobody used the elevator this late. Security sat downstairs the entire night and rarely did rounds. I got up, peeked into the hallway, empty. The elevator doors were still open, as if someone had just stepped off, except there was no one around. And they stayed open, like they were waiting for someone. I stood there for a moment, watching, expecting someone to appear. Nobody did. The doors finally slid shut, and I went back into the vending room, brushing it off as some glitch. I sat down again. A second later, I heard a soft thud behind me. I turned. A single bag of chips sat on the floor, right below the machine. Not the one I bought. Mine was already on the table. This one just fell. That machine has never dispensed anything on its own. You have to basically slam the buttons to get it to respond. At first, I thought maybe it malfunctioned, until I stepped closer. That's when I saw it. On the vending machine glass was a handprint. A long, blurry smear, like someone had pressed their whole palm against it and dragged it downward. The oils from the skin smudged into the dust on the glass in a way that looked fresh, too fresh, almost like fingertips were still visible at the edges. And the weirdest part? The print was big, long fingers, like unnaturally long. I took a step back, then I heard something I will never forget. A small click behind the soda machine, like someone shifting their foot to get balance, and then a low, muffled sliding noise, like someone adjusting their weight. Behind it, that machine was pushed flush against the wall. There was no space behind it, maybe 2 inches at the most. Nobody could fit there. That thought hit me hard enough that my chest tightened. I backed up toward the door, slowly. I didn't want to make noise. My shoes felt like they were scraping the tiles too loudly. I slipped out into the hallway, heart pounding. The hallway was empty, but it felt wrong, like someone was about to step out of one of the dark corners. I turned back to the vending room, trying to calm myself. Maybe it was the building settling. Maybe the noise wasn't what I thought. I stood there a few seconds, staring into the room. And then, the light flickered. In that brief dimming, I saw something move. A shape, tall, lean, standing at the far side of the machine, not in front of it, but behind it, impossibly, leaning slightly from the shadows, its head tilted at a strange angle, like it was observing me. The light came back fully, but the shape was gone. I ran, not a full sprint, but fast enough that my cartwheel squeaked on the tile. I headed toward the elevator, glancing over my shoulder every 2 seconds. The hallway suddenly felt suffocating, like the air had thickened behind me, like someone was walking just a few steps back. I got to the elevator and slammed the button. The doors opened immediately, too quickly, almost like they had been waiting. I stepped inside and hit the close button over and over, but the doors didn't move. They stayed open. I felt something shift in the hallway behind me. A pressure, a presence. I didn't want to look, but something inside me forced it. Just as the elevator lights flickered, I saw the vending machine room doorway at the end of the hall. And there it was. A figure. Tall. Thin. Standing just outside the vending room, turned toward me as if listening to the elevator chime. The face wasn't visible, just the silhouette. Shoulders too narrow, head too long, arms hanging a little too low, like its joints bent at wrong angles. The elevator doors finally reacted, sliding shut. The last thing I saw was the figure take one slow step into the hallway. I didn't breathe until I hit the lobby. Security saw me practically fall out of the elevator. I told them what happened, shaking, struggling to get the words out. They reviewed the 11th floor cameras while I stood behind them, trying not to vomit. Here's where it gets disturbing. There was no footage of anyone entering the 11th floor, nobody on the elevator, nobody in the hallways, nobody near the vending machine room. But then they pulled up the camera facing the vending room entrance. At 2:41 a.m., the exact time I heard the thud, the vending machine didn't just drop a bag. You could see the bag of chips slide forward as if pushed. A pale arm, thin, almost skeletal, reached out from behind the snack machine just enough to push it into view. The hand that appeared matched the long smear I saw on the glass. Security froze the frame. The hand had 6 fingers. They fast-forwarded. A few minutes later, when I ran out of the room, the figure stepped out from behind the machine all the way into camera view, except it didn't step. It unfolded, like its limbs had been compressed into a space far too small for a human body and were now stretching back into shape. It stood taller than the doorframe, neck cranes upward until the camera caught just the bottom half of its face. A mouth wide and slack, a jaw uncomfortably long, no eyes visible. Then it leaned forward as if smelling the air and walked toward the hallway, right after me. Security called police. They searched the entire floor. Nothing. No signs anyone had been there, no damage to the machines, no footprints except mine. The only evidence left was the handprint on the glass. When police swabbed it, they found something unusual. It wasn't human skin oil. It tested as something closer to keratin, like fingernail residue, as if the entire hand was made of horn. I quit that night. A week later, the building installed updated vending machines. The old snack machine was moved to storage, shoved against a concrete wall in the basement. A few nights ago, I got a call from one of the security guards I knew. He sounded shaken. He said they heard noises from the basement, metal shifting, something heavy scraping across concrete. They went to investigate. The vending machine, the same one from the 11th floor, had moved, dragged nearly 4 feet across the floor, and the dust behind it looked like something had crawled out. I used to live in an apartment that was old enough to creak at night, but not old enough to be called historic. One of those cheap wood-framed buildings landlords advertise as charming, even though everything inside feels like it's one bad week away from collapsing. I moved into the 3rd floor because it was all I could afford at the time. Small, cramped, paper-thin walls, but close to my job and quiet. What made it even quieter was the fact that the unit directly above mine, the one on the 4th floor, was empty and under renovation. The landlord said it had been vacant for almost a year. "We locked it up until the contractors finish," he told me. "Nobody goes up there." The first week I lived there, I believed him. Then around 1:03 a.m. I started hearing footsteps. At first it was subtle, a few slow steps like someone pacing a short line back and forth. Not running, not stomping, just walking, 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 in the same exact rhythm every night. I remember lying in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling while the footsteps went on right above me. My vent rattled with every step. The overhead light fixture vibrated just a little. I told myself old buildings make noises, pipes expand, wood adjusts. Maybe some animal got in, but these weren't random creaks or groans. Someone was walking up there. I brought it up to the landlord a few days later. I told him I wasn't complaining, just curious whether someone had moved in. He stared at me and shook his head. "No one's up there. Contractors haven't been in for weeks. But I hear footsteps, I said, every night. He laughed it off. Old building, you'll get used to the sounds. Except the sounds got worse. A week later, the walking turned into dragging, long, heavy dragging across the floorboards right above my bedroom. It didn't sound like furniture, it sounded like something soft being pulled, like fabric or a body or something with weight behind it. Slow and rhythmic. Drag, pause, drag, pause. Sometimes lasting 10-15 minutes. One night, I recorded it on my phone. When I played it back, I could hear it loudly and clearly. Boom, boom, scrape, boom, scrape, like someone was pulling dead weight from one end of the room to the other. I sent the audio to the landlord. He didn't laugh that time. He came over the next morning with the spare key to the upstairs unit. When he turned the lock, he had to jiggle it. The door was stiff, as if nobody had moved it in months. The smell of dust hit us immediately. The room was untouched, exactly the way a long vacant apartment should look. No sign of anyone squatting, no footprints on the floor, no moved furniture. There wasn't any furniture at all, just sheets of dust coating everything. But then I noticed something. In the center of the living room, trailing through that thick layer of dust, was a line of prints. Not shoe prints, not socks, bare footprints, human, clear, detailed enough to see individual toe outlines, one set. The landlord knelt to get a closer look and frowned. The prints started near the center of the room and went toward the far left corner. Then they stopped, right at the wall, like the person just walked straight into it and vanished. The landlord wiped his hands on his jeans and muttered something about kids breaking in, even though nothing was broken, nothing was missing, and the dust around the prints was undisturbed. He locked the door, said he'd look into it, and left. That night I could hardly sleep. Every noise made me jump. I kept replaying the recording over and over until the dragging sound felt like it was still happening in the room with me. Around 2:17 a.m., I woke to something new. Knocking. 3 slow knocks coming from the ceiling of my bedroom. Not the wall, not the hallway. My ceiling. It was soft at first, so faint I thought I was imagining it. Then it got louder, hard enough to rattle the small vent near my closet. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. I stared upward, frozen, unable to breathe. My eyes were locked on the exact spot where the knocks echoed, half expecting the drywall to crack open. I grabbed my phone and opened the voice recorder again, but as soon as I hit record, the knocking stopped. The next morning I sent another text to the landlord, but he didn't reply. I ended up driving to his office. His secretary said he wasn't in today, which didn't make sense considering his car was outside. I wasn't about to argue. I just left and went back home, dreading the next night. I started sleeping on the couch, hoping the sounds wouldn't be as loud there. I was wrong. Around 1:48 a.m., the footsteps came back, but not above the bedroom, above the living room. Slow, dragging steps moving across the ceiling, right over my head. I muted the TV and listened as they followed a path from one side of the room to the other, then returned, then paused directly above where I was lying. Silence. Then the floorboards creaked, like someone kneeling. I grabbed my keys and left the apartment. I didn't even put on shoes. I got in my car and drove around until the sun started rising. I only came back because I needed clothes and a shower before work. When I walked in, something felt wrong. The air inside was stale, heavy. I looked down the hallway toward the bedroom and saw that the ceiling vent, normally shut tight, was hanging open. I didn't sleep in the apartment the next few nights. I stayed with a friend, claiming my heater broke. I didn't want to admit that I was scared of something I couldn't even describe. On the 4th night away, my friend asked me why I kept staring at the ceiling corners. I told him I was fine and went to sleep early. The next day, the landlord finally called me back. He sounded shaken. His voice was lower, quieter than usual. I checked the attic space above the units, he said. Just wanted to rule out the idea of animals or something. His pause made my stomach drop. What did you find? He cleared his throat. You should probably come see this. I didn't want to, but curiosity, or maybe fear, pushed me to go. He led me to a small, barely noticeable panel in the fourth-floor hallway ceiling, right outside the vacant unit. He climbed up with a flashlight and poked his head inside. After a moment, he motioned for me to follow. The attic was bigger than I expected, one long, dark crawl space stretching over the entire top floor. The smell hit me first, musty, stale, like something had been living in there without sunlight or airflow. In the far back corner, illuminated by the weak beam of the landlord's flashlight, was a small setup. A sleeping bag, wrinkled, old, flattened like someone had been lying on it for a long time. Next to it, food wrappers, half-eaten granola bars, empty water bottles, a moldy apple core. But what made me step back was the object lying on top of the sleeping bag. A piece of paper, folded once, edges curled, writing scrawled across it in shaky, uneven handwriting. The landlord didn't want to touch it. I picked it up. The note said, "Stopped living upstairs. I live in the walls now. She's loud. She needs to be quiet." My heart stopped. The she was me. I lived in the unit directly below where this note was found. I dropped the paper and stepped away from the sleeping bag. The landlord backed toward the opening, flashlight shaking in his hand. "We should call the police," he said. But the police didn't find anyone. Not in the attic, not in the fourth-floor unit, not in the stairwells or basement. They said whoever it was probably broke in weeks earlier and left before we checked. That explanation made no sense. The footprints in the dust had been fresh. The footsteps happened every night. The dragging, the knocking, the vent shifting open. Someone was there. And they hadn't left. The landlord changed the locks and sealed the attic entry. But I didn't stay another night. I packed everything I owned into my car by sunset and drove to a motel. 2 weeks later, after I'd finally found a new place to live, I got a voicemail from the landlord. He sounded terrified. He said contractors had finally come to tear down a portion of the wall in the vacant fourth-floor unit, something about mold behind the drywall. When they removed the first panel of the wall, they found a crawlspace framing that shouldn't have existed. And inside it was another sleeping bag, more food wrappers, and a narrow tunnel carved through insulation and wooden beams, leading downward toward the third floor, toward my old unit. The last thing he said before the voicemail cut off. They checked inside the tunnel. Something moved, something fast. It wasn't an animal. It laughed. I blocked his number. I never went back to the building. And sometimes late at night, when everything is silent and I'm lying in bed, I swear I hear slow footsteps on the floor above me, even though nobody lives there. I used to work overnight security at a small distribution warehouse on the edge of the city. The kind of place that receives shipments at dawn and sends trucks out by 7 a.m. The overnight shift wasn't complicated. Monitor the cameras, log any unusual activity, walk the floor occasionally, and make sure nobody wandered in. I liked the quiet. I liked the routine. But mostly, I liked the fact that nothing ever happened. Until the night everything did. The building was a large rectangle with long aisles of shelving, stacked with boxes 20 feet high. The floors were concrete, always cold. Even in summer, my breath sometimes fogged in the corners. Everything echoed, your footsteps, your breathing, even the buzzing of the lights. The security room was at the front of the warehouse. 6 monitors lined the wall, showing every angle. Loading dock, aisles, storage cages, break room, parking lot, main doors. It was around 2:03 a.m. when the first camera flickered. Just a quick glitch, static for half a second. It wasn't unusual. This building was old, the wiring cheap. I noted the time and went back to scrolling through my phone. 2 minutes later, another camera flickered, then a third, then a fourth. Then all 6 screens went black at once. They didn't shut off, they stayed on, but displayed nothing but a grainy darkness. No feed, no static, just a void. I tapped the side of one monitor. It buzzed faintly but didn't change. I should have called maintenance or my supervisor, but something held me back. Some instinct, deep and primal, telling me to stay quiet, to stay still. I sat there, staring at the dead monitors, when a sound echoed from the warehouse floor. A sound I knew instantly. A sound nobody wanted to hear after hours. The motion sensor chime. A soft electronic ding that triggered whenever something moved, usually a forklift or a worker. Except there were no forklifts running, and there were no workers. I stood up slowly, my chair squeaking on the tile, and stared down the long viewing window that overlooked aisle 1. The overhead lights were still on. The warehouse glowed in that pale fluorescent haze, sterile and cold. Nothing moved, but then the motion sensor chimed again. Ding. This time from deeper inside the building. Then again. Ding. Ding. 3 different sensors, 3 different locations, all within seconds. I tried to tell myself maybe a bird got inside, or some raccoon, something explainable. But the sensors were placed high, too high for any small animal. I checked the cameras again, hoping the feeds had come back, still black. That's when something strange happened. One monitor lit up again, not fully, just a faint glow, like the darkness was pulling back. The feed was grainy, barely visible, but I recognized the camera angle. Aisle 7, the center of the warehouse. As the image sharpened slightly, I saw movement, something shifting in the far distance, a shape. Tall, thin, walking slowly between the shelves. At first I thought it was a trick of the low resolution, some distortion, maybe a shadow. But the more I stared, the clearer it became. A person, no, a figure, moving with slow, deliberate steps. Its limbs looked strange, like they didn't bend the right way. The posture was off, the head too low, like it was craning downward as it walked. Then it turned, not toward the next aisle, toward the camera. The feed flickered, then went black again. I stepped back instinctively, hitting the desk behind me. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to get out, to run. But I forced myself to breathe, forced myself to think. The cameras were failing one by one. The sensors were going off. Something was inside the warehouse, but I didn't know what. I picked up my flashlight and the metal baton we carried, not that it brought any comfort, and stepped out of the security office. My footsteps echoed immediately across the concrete floor. The warehouse always had a hum, a low electrical drone from the lights and machinery, but now, silence. Total silence, like the building itself was holding its breath. I walked slowly down the main aisle, my flashlight cutting a path through the empty space. Dust particles floated like snow. The stacked boxes towered over me, forming narrow corridors on each side. I reached aisle 7, the aisle from the camera. The sensor above it blinked red. Something had triggered it only moments earlier. I swept my light across the aisle. Nothing. Just rows and rows of boxes, the shelves vanishing into the distance. I walked forward, my boots thumping softly. Every sound bounced off the metal racks and came back distorted. Halfway down the aisle, I noticed something on the floor. Footprints. Not boot prints, not worker prints, bare footprints, long, narrow, deep impressions in the dust as if whoever made them carried weight or walked with force. And they didn't walk in a straight line. They zigzagged, crossed over themselves, circles, loops, like someone pacing in confusion or practicing, testing. I followed them slowly, heart pounding. They led toward a T intersection between the aisles. To the left, total darkness. The lights there had been glitching for weeks. To the right, dozens of boxes stacked, shrink-wrapped for shipping. The footprints went left, into the dark. I hesitated, staring into that pitch-black stretch of warehouse. My flashlight beam disappeared into it, swallowed whole. Then, from that darkness, a sound. A slow inhale. Not a gasp, not a breath. More like the suction of air through something narrow, wet and rough. I stepped back. My flashlight trembled. Then I saw movement. Just the faintest outline of something stepping forward, something tall. Shoulders brushing the shelves, head bent at an unnatural angle to avoid hitting the overhead beams. It stopped at the edge of the light. I couldn't see its face, just its shape. Then it bent lower, as if leaning to see me clearly. I turned and ran, not the heroic kind of run. A terrified, stumbling, gasping sprint back toward the front of the warehouse. The motion sensors chimed in rapid sequence behind me. Ding, 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 ding. It was following. I burst into the security office and slammed the door shut. My hands shook as I flipped the manual lock. The room suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. The monitors flickered wildly. One by one, the feeds came back. Not fully. Each camera was glitching, freezing, distorting. but enough to see movement. Aisle 1, a tall shape moving past the racks. Aisle 3, a long arm brushing across boxes. Loading dock, a figure pacing near the exit doors. Break room, just darkness, until something leaned into view, filling half the screen before the feed cut again. Every camera showed it, and every camera showed it closer. I grabbed the phone on the desk and dialed my supervisor, hands shaking so hard the numbers blurred. It rang once, twice. Then the lights in the office cut out. Total darkness swallowed the room. The phone clicked, the line went dead. I froze. In the darkness, just inches beyond the office door, something pressed against the glass, a shape, a long, thin silhouette, slowly leaning forward. The glass bowed slightly, creaked. Then it stopped. Silence. Then, from somewhere deep in the warehouse, something metallic crashed, like a shelving unit tipping over. Whatever was outside the door turned away, running or moving quickly toward the sound. I didn't waste another second. I unlocked the door, slipped out, and sprinted toward the emergency exit on the far wall. The red exit sign was the only light left. My footsteps hammered the concrete, echoing through the building. Behind me, something screeched. Not human, not animal. A high, rasping sound like metal dragged across tile. I didn't look back. I shoved the emergency door open, the alarm blaring into the night, and ran across the empty parking lot toward my car. I didn't stop until I was inside, doors locked, engine roaring. As I sped away, I looked back through the windshield. The warehouse stood still, silent, but one detail made my blood run ice cold. In the top window of the security office, a shape leaned against the glass, tall, thin, watching me leave. I quit the next morning, didn't give 2 weeks' notice, didn't ask for my last paycheck. 2 days later, a fire tore through the warehouse. Electrical malfunction, they said. The building was destroyed. But here's the thing. One of the firefighters who responded told me something offhand, not realizing I used to work there. He said when they first entered the building, before the flames spread, something was inside. Something tall, standing in the smoke near the loading dock. Something that didn't move, something that didn't burn. They tried to approach it, but it stepped backward, into the fire, and disappeared. They chalked it up to disorientation, smoke, light tricks. But I know what they saw. The same thing I saw on the cameras. The same thing that walked the aisles behind me. The same thing that pressed its face to the office door. Whatever it was, it didn't leave when the building burned. Whatever it was, still exists. And sometimes, late at night when I'm driving past empty warehouses, I swear I see something tall moving between the shelves inside, watching, waiting.